All right, joining us today, Miss JAIMEE Harris. How are you doing this evening?
Doing great. How are you?
Good. You're out there in Key West, you say, huh? So what brings you out to Key West?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a long, crazy story, but basically, my partner started coming down here 20 years, well, several years ago, wrote an album down here and then stopped coming here about 20 years ago. And during the pandemic, uh, we've lost just a lot of people this year, and not to COVID, but just to weird stuff. Like we had a good friend of ours get bit by a tick on this trail that we hike
Oh,
every day, and something in her body um, couldn't handle it, and so she had an overreaction and a really intense autoimmune response, passed away. And it's getting dark at like 4:30. It's just really depressing, and so we started thinking about coming down here. And oddly, Jimmy Buffett, who has a great connection with Key West, has cut a couple of my partner's songs. And so she started calling some of the Buffett folks, and they hooked us up with this great new hotel on Stock Island called the Perry Hotel. So Stock Island is, I guess, this is my first time here. I don't know if you're familiar with Key West, but they call it Stock Island because that's where they kept the livestock.
oh,
And for years, it was like, just a bunch of shipping boats. And now they've really redone this marina, and it's beautiful. And this hotel is opened up. And what they're trying to do here is bring in songwriters. There's not a huge scene for that in Key West. It's mostly a lot of cover songs because that's what people want to hear down here to have a good
right.
time. But they really want
Yeah.
to bring in original artists. So we had this opportunity to play a live show here, socially
Wow.
distanced on the lawn, and we just fell in love with it. So we're sticking around.
Cool. Yeah. To answer your question, I was actually in Florida right before COVID hit. I was wrapping up a tour, and it was kind of a, for lack of a better term, kind of a corporate tour. So I was doing a solo tour, and it was great. But I had some time in between, like Tampa, Orlando, Miami. I think that was it in Florida. And I was trying to get down to Key West, but to book some just like, Tuesday or Wednesday night shows, pick up a gig. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but I was really hoping to get there about 10 months ago. And I'm sorry I didn't, but yeah, it's got a cool vibe. My brother kind of brought me up to speed, and you hear about Key West, but kind of a piratey, Buffety kind of just a cool, chill, weird spot, right?
Exactly. Total characters here and
Yeah.
just really friendly people.
Hmm.
And for here, I mean, it feels different. Like we're in Nashville now, so it doesn't feel very safe in Nashville. So we
Hmm.
have been in our house since March. Like our last gig was in Seattle on March 15th. We were the last
Whoa.
gig to play the Triple Door, and it was terrifying. Like there are buses riding around town with nobody in them. There were CNN crews, just news crews on the street. It was terrifying. And at that point, I think there were only like 150 cases that we knew about, in a nursing home in Washington. But it was freaky. I mean, we were supposed to play in Portland, I think the day before, and the gig got canceled. And I'm a big pinball fan. So, I mean, now that I think about it, it's like so scary and horrifying. But I was playing pinball at this bar next to our hotel because the gig got canceled. And this girl that worked at the gig, Doug, was crying and talking to somebody on the phone. She's like, they just laid off the whole staff. And I was like, okay, here we go. This is a big deal. This is for real.
Damn, March
And
15th
so I think
in
because that happened,
Seattle. Yeah.
it just like scared us. So we've, I mean, rightfully so. So we have just been in our house with the exception of walking the trail, and we don't have like a little outdoor area to hang out. And here in Key West, everything is outdoors.
Yeah.
Everyone's wearing a mask, on the street, there are police officers enforcing it. So it
Wow.
just feels really safe here.
Well, that's good. So are you there indefinitely? You're just kind of waiting the storm out down there?
We're coming back on Monday,
Oh, okay, okay, cool.
but we
And
we
back to
might
Nashville?
back to Nashville, but we
Okay.
might come back here. I don't know.
Well,
We
yeah,
love it.
March 15th. Yeah, that's a good place to chill out and just let time pass, uh, you know, by you, and just let the world be itself while you kind of chill in Key West. So that's cool that you found that little spot to post up. And yeah, March 15th in Seattle. So the very last interview I did, which was last Friday, this will be released later, so time won't be the same. But they're a brother sister rock and roll band that are from Seattle, so they had their record release the night before the entire city locked down, which they announced that day. So they got to have a great party. But yeah, they're from there, so they've been dealing with all that crap that Seattle's been dealing with. But let's kind of get back to Nashville. So you used to be in Austin, correct?
Yeah, I was in Austin for about 10 years.
Okay, that's how
Loved
long
it.
I've been here right now. And when did you move to Nashville?
Oh my gosh, I can't even do time right now. I can't really remember because I kind of like didn't live anywhere for a short period of time. So my story was I mean, I've played in bands and sang backups for lots of artists and been doing my thing in Austin for about 10 years. And on top of that, I, of course, was working a job. So I was the only admin person working for a doctor. Um, Dr. Jules. I don't know. You've probably seen him around town. He's the guy that kind of looks like Dee Snider with a cowboy hat, hangs out at Barton
Yeah.
Springs
Oh
a lot.
yeah. Sure. Sure.
Yeah, exactly right. That was my boss, fabulous boss, super into
Nice.
music. But I got asked to be in a pretty popular touring band as a background singer, and I had to turn it down because I had this job, and so I knew that there would come a point when I had to make the leap, when I couldn't stay at this job that would require training someone. So I did that, and then I pretty much didn't live anywhere, was on the road full time. So I think I landed in Nashville like the end of last year, but who knows?
So it's
I
been
really can't do time
about
anymore.
a year. And how long were you on the
Yeah.
road for that stretch?
Oh my gosh, since like
Another time question.
yeah, so I left my job in May, and I don't know if you know Jane Ellen Bryant, who's another fabulous
Yeah.
artist in
Yeah.
Austin.
Yeah.
She's Yeah, so Jane and I were roommates for 3 years.
Okay.
And on the second year that we lived together, she said, I'm going to quit my job. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, I just have this feeling that it's all going to work out. She's a really good gut. And sure enough, she quit her job, became a full-time musician, and it's worked out great.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, that's really incredible. And I find Jane inspiring in so many ways as an artist and as a songwriter and as a person. I just love her so much. And it was like a similar thing. Like I just had this feeling. I came home and I said, I'm going to quit my job and I know it's going to work out. And my record was supposed to come out in like June of 2018 and that got delayed. So I had this giant tour booked, like pretty much all through the country, So, and like, I had no business touring the country really at that time. Like I had a record out, but I didn't know what I was doing. I'd only really done like house shows and um, kind of like weekend tours and stuff. So I wasn't
Mm.
like ready to go on a huge West Coast tour where I like really never played before, but I did that for a while, and then I did a whole tour of New York with my friend Graham Weber. We just like went everywhere in New York City for 2 weeks, played all these
Mm.
different clubs and stuff. And then I started going out on the road, I guess, with Mary Gauthier in August of 2018. And by the end of that, as an opening act and then singing with her. And then by the end of that year, she had been nominated for a Grammy.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so it started out
That's
like I
good
hadn't been
juju.
anywhere. And
Yeah.
then, yes, and then August, it was like all of these, Kerrville, Rocky Mountain Folk Festival. Like I can't even remember where all we were. And then we went to Europe, my
Wow.
first time out of the country. We were in
Oh yeah.
Italy for 2 weeks. We were in Holland for 2 weeks. I got a record
Mm.
deal in Netherlands. Then we came back and like, it's just been crazy. And we would still be on the road right now if COVID hadn't happened.
Oh my.
It was like I quit my job and got on a rocket ship.
That is fantastic. And then, so let's kind of take it from there. So things were going really good, and then they weren't. Just like everybody, not necessarily everybody was doing great, but certainly everybody was not doing too good around COVID. So, what have you been up to since COVID? Since kind of mid March, you said you wouldn't be on tour if it wasn't for COVID. So, how have you been able to kind of use your time over the last
Well, it's
coming up on
interesting
9 months
because,
now?
yeah, it kind of ties into, it's funny you said like you were doing great, and on the internet and on paper, it looked great. But honestly, I had a full on breakdown.
Mm,
Like, I already struggle with some mental health stuff, and
mm.
when I started playing music, I played with my dad in a duo. And then I was in duos and trios. And by the time I left Austin, my four-piece band grew into a seven-piece band. And I knew how to rock and roll and do that, but I mean, I call it folk and roll because I am a folk singer, but with a
Hmm.
band, and I know how to do that or to shine light on another musician that does something fantastic. I have never, in all of the years that I've been playing, which now is 20 years, really been on stage with just me and an acoustic guitar. So all of a sudden, I'm in front of these audiences, and really where it fell apart for me was in the Netherlands because the way that the tour was, I kind of got tacked onto the tour. Well, they print these, I don't know, programs, I guess you would call them, for the shows way in advance. So there wasn't any way to really notify the attendees of the show that I was going to be a part of the show. So I step out. I'm not married. They don't know who I am. They're not expecting me. They didn't pay to see me, and I was feeling just an intense amount of resistance. Like, these people do not want me to be here, and I'm in a different country. And, I'm trying to explain things like, a lot of that the record I put out and what I do is about the criminal justice system and healthcare and addiction and helping people that are addicted. It's like in the Netherlands, they don't really have those issues. So I had to figure out, like, okay, I have to explain in America or even Texas, this is how it works, and this is why I'm passionate about this. But what that made me realize, I'll get to your question. What it made me realize is that, wow, and I do believe that I can write a song that is, of course, extremely personal, the deeply personal equals the universal, right? That's how
Hmm.
songs work. That's the
Right.
magic.
Mhm.
But the idea of, like, me kind of talking about myself on stage, I'm like, that is so boring. Of course it's boring. Like, who cares? It's like when your mom calls and is like, so and so's gallbladder is not working. You're like, I don't care about, so I don't know so and so. Like, that's kind of what I was doing to an audience.
Hmm.
And so what it's made me, like, want to do is to make sure that every single song that I have is like has no leaks in it. So I've been working to kind of intentionally write for things that I can sort of talk about on stage that have a story, for songs that are just so tight they can be sung by me and with just me and a guitar. Because I think, as a woman, another thing is, like, there's a lot of things that I can do with my voice that I absolutely shy away from in songwriting because it feels weird to, like, show off my voice, and I don't want to be known as a chick singer. It's really important to me to be known as a songwriter. But
Hmm.
what I learned is, if all I have is my guitar and my voice, I better learn to be a good guitar player. I better sing my ass off in these songs. So that's what I've been up to. I've been, like, really working hard on editing these songs. Some I've had for 3 years that are finally now just right. And I've been taking guitar lessons on Zoom to learn how to play lead and to expand my knowledge of this instrument that I've haphazardly played without any formal knowledge for years.
That's all very cool, and I can kind of commiserate with you on that because, my I did acoustic stuff when I was in Chicago before, when I was in between my last band and kind of developing my own solo band. And so I did that for a little bit in Chicago, and I wasn't very good at it, but I was doing my best to get better at it. And then I took a long break here in Austin because I was really just focused on the three-piece rock and roll band, doing everything you can do with that. And so it was about eight years of not really working on the acoustic game that much. And then there was a point where, like, I gotta start doing this more. And so I'd start playing more gigs, and you are vulnerable. And you really gotta, you just like you said, you gotta up your guitar game, you gotta up your vocal game, you have to add nuance, you have to be in time, you gotta be, because otherwise, you don't want to be somebody who just walk by, even though that will happen. You want to touch people, and you want to be a rock star in the most kind of intimate, compact form. So I totally know what you feel like. And to speak to, the big crowds and the crowds who didn't know you, I had a very similar situation right before COVID. I was telling you, I was on that corporate tour. What I was doing was I was touring around with Triumph motorcycles and just playing, like, basically opening up
Oh, cool.
their 30 parties across the country that were showing off their product. But it was very similar to what you were saying, because it's, these people are not here to see me. They're here to see a line of new motorcycles, get some free shit. And, but I was the entrance music to this thing, just an acoustic guitar. So I was like, look, I got to come in there and I got to rumble. I got to rumble the energy of the room, because it's 300, sometimes 500 people in there, just filtering and not expect, and that's all that's playing. So it's like, man, you better you better
Hmm.
tackle the monster or get out of here. You know what I mean? So it sounds exactly like what you were doing. And it does surprise me because listening to your voice, you know, it would strike me that you would be in your most natural state, just singing to people with an acoustic guitar, because that's what kind of voice you have, you know, and you call it folk rock. That's a great description. But, you know, it definitely has that folk intimate. And you, in your songs with the band, you mean, you take it down. You know, there's lots of songs where it's right here, you know, it's real intimate. So it does surprise me that you know, had to kind of break through that barrier like you were talking about. But I'm sure it was so. Okay, you did start that by saying you're having a breakdown, but I'm assuming the positives that you did mention kind of overcame that to an extent.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, one thing that, I'll never forget it. We were in Amsterdam. We were playing at this church in Amsterdam. And I've been kind of telling Mary, like, I don't think this is working. And I think for a while she thought, like, oh, you're just nervous, which I was, like, you're just nervous. But she
Mhm.
could see it. For some reason, I don't know what was different about that night, maybe her vantage point, but she's like, you're right. There is a resistance here. I see. So what can we do? So we adjusted it. So instead of like putting me on as an opener, she kind of gave me a couple songs in the middle of the show. So there was the setup of, okay, this person is a part of, she's a harmony singer in this band. Mary is obviously cool, because she's collaborating with her. And then Mary would, she's not a harmony singer, so she says, but she would stay on stage and sing with me. And her violin player, who's a phenomenal musician named Michaela Gazic, stayed on stage and played with me. So
Mm.
that way it was kind of like, it was so sweet. It's like they kind of just came up and supported me. And after that, the tours that I did, it was clear that I was opening. And you know how it's like, I think the other thing that's challenging for me is that I think the reason that I write songs, or at least what got me started on writing songs, is because I don't feel like I'm a great speaker. It's as you can tell a little bit, it's hard for me to concisely say, or sometimes I can kind of go around the thing, and that's why I write songs, is so I can like, okay, I've got three verses and maybe a bridge to like say what I need to say. This is like a Monopoly board, like everything counts. Like I've got to like
Mm.
really like punch them. And the in between without the band, it's just like a whole new art form for me. I know a lot of
Right.
artists that take acting classes or improv classes so that they can deal with the audience in that way. But I think I mean, what I heard is that I got stronger and stronger and stronger. But what I feel is just a desire to be better and better and better, because it's important to me to connect, and I've seen some artists that stand up there with an acoustic guitar and they play their songs. They don't say anything but thank you in between, and it works. I see other artists that don't do that, and it totally bombs. So it's just a whole for him. And I've got to work, I think, just as hard on my banter, whether that means I need, when this is over, to take some improv classes or acting classes, or just ask every successful solo musician I know what they did to get better at it. I need to work just as hard on that part as I do on my songs. That's what I think I've learned over the past year and a half.
That's excellent. And what more can you ask for as an artist is something pushing you towards, you know, your potential at a greater speed, you know. And that's, as you get older, often that's something artists struggle with for any reasons. Maybe they have too much success, maybe they're overburdened by the lack of success, or turned off by the industry, or who knows. But that's always been key for me, is, you know, having something pushing you to be better at all times. If you can have that, you're going to be able to look back at the end of it or whenever and say, all right, I kept it going, I was getting better all the time. So it's really excellent to hear that that's kind of what you've been doing. So to kind of go back a little bit, I'm always very interested in musicians' roots, story, and structure. So can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up or where you came from, not only as a human being, but as a music performer, music lover? Like, what were you listening to when you were young, in your middle years? People and or maybe they're authors or movies or whatever that really influenced you and kind of set the foundation for your artistic ability.
Yeah, well, when I was five, around Christmas time, I heard this Emmylou Harris Christmas song called "Light of the Stable," And I kept putting it on repeat. And so my parents, I'd asked for a Pegasus for Christmas, like a flying horse. And my parents were like, maybe there's something else that you want. And I wouldn't budge, but they thought, well, maybe she's interested in music. And so I got a guitar. And then in 1997, Fleetwood Mac did this reunion show called The Dance. I don't know if you're a Fleetwood Mac fan at all, but they basically got together and played Rumors and stuff live. And it was like, I was like, I don't care if I'm Stevie Nicks or if I'm Lindsey Buckingham, but like, that's totally what I want to do. And of course, I grew up in Hewitt, which is a small town outside of Waco. And there wasn't an independent radio station there at the time. There wasn't an independent record store there. So basically, what I discovered is music was anything that my dad fed to me, who's a huge music fan, but also what was on the radio. So for me, all of the, 90s alternative stuff, I loved it. And 90s country, the Dixie Chicks. I think a lot of girls my age that got a guitar when they were young learned a lot about music from the Dixie Chicks. That was like a huge deal. And then when I was 10, my parents had me when they were really young. They had me when they were 20. And my dad played in a cover band to put himself through college and law school. And so when I started learning enough covers, I would play cover songs in the set breaks of his band. And so when there's a woman named Beth Petrick that would drive the getaway car. So sometimes I would play and the bar would be like, oh, she's great. Like, I'm excited to hear her play again. And other times they'd be like, she's 10 years old. Like, you can't have her in the bar. I don't care if you're her dad. You got to get her out of here. So for however many sets I didn't get to play, she would buy me a CD at Walmart. So I could I either got music or I got to play. So it was a pretty cool deal. I've been thinking about it a lot. Hal Ketchum. For some reason, my dad had that Hal Ketchum greatest hits record. Who Hal just passed away recently, and that was a huge
Hmm.
influence on me. And that record still sounds a record. Those collections of songs still sounds really timeless. So basically, after that, when I was 12, maybe 13, they had the first Austin City Limits Music Festival. So I got to see Emmylou Harris, who I, of course, loved my whole play for the first time. I saw Julie Miller and Buddy Miller. Julie Miller was from Waco. So seeing somebody from Waco that was on stage singing like that with Emmylou Harris blew my mind. It kind of made me think like, oh my gosh, I can do this. Like I didn't realize all of this, people. I didn't even know Ann Richards was basically from Waco until recently. Like I didn't know. So seeing someone that successful like really really inspired me. I also saw Patty Griffin, and that was pretty life changing for me. My dad bought me every single Patty Griffin CD that they had at the merch tent instead of getting us a hotel room for the night, because he could afford to do one or the other. And I think he knew that those CDs were really important. And that's when I began writing my first songs. James McMurtry too. Oh my gosh. I mean, when I remember visiting Austin, or I played a show in Austin, and I was thinking about moving to Lewisville, Texas to work at a shoe store. And the guy spent quite a bit of time preaching to me and saying, you should really move here instead. And we were at the Barton Spring Saloon. So he said, down that way, pointing at Congress, there's a club in town, the Continental Club, where James McMurtry plays twice a week for less than $10. And I was like, what? And that's why I moved down. I was like, I can't believe I can see James McMurtry twice a week in this town. This is great. And then I found out a lot of my heroes, it's Towns Van Zandt, had spent time here, were, all a part of this beautiful Texas music scene, especially in Austin.
So can you hold on just one second, Jaimee? There's some noise going
Yeah.
on in the back. Just sorry about that. My daughter is crying in the other
Oh
room over.
no.
Just don't. She's
How
fine.
how old is
She
she?
had a great day. She's 5. So it's funny you're just talking about when you were 5, but you mentioned um I think you mentioned the Dixie Chicks. I wonder if you were thinking about someone else too, but you said how the Dixie Chicks influenced a lot of girls who became rockers or guitar players or singers, whatever. And there's this new movie out. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's Trolls, and it's Trolls World Tour. And there's this character in it called Barb, who's like this rocker chick, just like this rock kind of thing. And Ozzy Osbourne plays the dad. I mean, he's got like 2 lines in it,
Wow.
but he's the dad's voice. But I'm wondering, if the next generation will be influenced by this Barb character. It's not quite as cool as the Dixie Chicks, but it's in that same vein of kind of getting into the bloodstream. you know.
That's funny because today we had lunch with this guy named Bobby Mangelli, who was Jimmy Buffett lawn guy many, many, many years ago when he
Nice.
was a teenager. And now he owns a lot of restaurant. He's the guy that got us to Stock Island. He owns a lot of incredible restaurants here, a huge music fan. And his wife was telling us today that their granddaughter is will not stop singing Jolene, because I guess Jolene, that
Mhm.
Trolls movie.
Oh,
I was
is
like,
it?
that's fabulous.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
she
I don't
got it.
even
Maybe
remember
it's a
that.
different one, or maybe there's a new Trolls World Tour. I don't know.
Maybe it could
But
be. There's a
apparently,
lot of them. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's a cool way to to learn music for sure.
Yeah, at the outset, I was like, "Oh, what is this? What's this movie?"
Yeah.
But the way they do it is it's pretty okay. It gets some bad music in their system and some good music too. So you kind of found everything you were looking for in Austin, and you did it for 10 years. So how did Austin treat you? I mean, if you were here, did kind of fate just take you away with that tour? Would you have stayed in Austin longer had it not been for that? Or were you kind of looking to get out of it? And I guess after you kind of answer that, you can tell us just how your time here was over that decade.
Oh my gosh, it was fabulous. I mean, to live, I mean, when I first moved to Austin, I, I kind of followed David Ramirez, who's another artist I was singing with at the
Mhm.
time. He moved here because a producer, a fabulous producer named Brian Douglas Phillips moved there, and we all just kind of followed. And I quickly became friends with a lot of people in the music scene. I mean, I felt really embraced early on. Um, but several things were fun. Like in one way, it was incredible. Like Kalu James, who I'm still good friends with, Josh Halverson. We just sit up all night and play songs till the sun came up, and then I had to go to work. It was like kind of crazy, but I loved it. I loved it so much just to be in a community with people that took songs seriously and that just loved music. That was kind of my first experience with that, so it was beautiful.
That's great.
But what was
Yeah.
going on with me was that, I mean, one, I had a serious drinking problem that I had to deal with and reckon with in 2014. And so, kind of up till then, like, one, that was very distracting, my drinking. And I just wasn't in the right scene at the same time. Like,
Mhm.
I I love all different kinds of music. Like I can't believe I didn't mention Tom Petty, by the way, earlier when we were talking. Tom Petty, Leonard Cohen. I guess it just goes without saying, Tom Petty, of course.
Yeah.
But I
Right.
mean, right? So, but I felt like I was kind of in this like hipster scene, and the deal is like I'm just weird. I will never be cool. I'm just a big nerd about a lot of things. So I'm never too cool, and I'm never too cool to be cool. I hate going to shows where like the band is on fire and everyone's just like, it is so annoying to me. Like, are you too cool to enjoy music? Like, what is your life about?
Right.
Like, I don't know. I shouldn't judge. If that makes them happy, that's totally cool, but it's just not my scene. So I was
Right.
like, where are the people in Austin that listen to Patty Griffin, that listen to Emmylou Harris? Like, where are these people? And it turns out they're at the Cactus Cafe. They were at Strange Brew.
Mm.
I was in a group for a short period of time called Five and Dime with Ellen Barrett and Darwin Smith. It was super fun. I don't know if you know Darwin. He's
I don't know if I
an
know Darwin. I
amazing
don't think so.
songwriter. He's not a lot of people know about him, I guess, that are well, if you've been around Austin a while, you would know about him. He
Sure.
played with Daniel Johnston for a while. He's been in various
Okay.
bands.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's kind of like a Dave Rawlings type, and he's very zen. And he turned me on to like David Halley and some Joe Ely songs I didn't know, and just fabulous, fabulous songs. And we were in a group that was very like three-part harmony, folky, and we got to be a part of a James Taylor tribute at the Cactus Cafe. And when I first moved to Austin, was still drinking. Uh, I saw that there was a benefit for Will Sexton, who I didn't know. He had had a stroke. And I did see that Patty Griffin and Jimmy LaFave, who was another one of my absolute favorites before I moved to town, were playing the show. So my friends, Kelly and I, bust on the street for a couple days to get into that show. And when I went to that show, I saw a songwriter named Betty Sue. And I completely fell in love with Betty's voice and her music. And so fast forward to 2015, we play the show at the Cactus Cafe, and Betty Sue's on the bill. And I was so excited, and I was nervous for her to hear me sing because I knew she was like a real singer. And we ended up, hanging out, and she was really complimentary. And I was like, wow, maybe we can be friends. And then, 6 hours later, I was in a jail cell for several days for drunk driving. And after I got bailed out and I got my phone charged, the first message I got from someone that wasn't like, "Where are you? What happened?" or, any of that stuff was from Betty. And she asked me if I would open up a gig for her 3 months down the road or something like that. And I thought to myself, maybe I can stay sober long enough to open this gig for Betty. And that changed my life. And Betty, you know how the Austin music scene is. It's like you meet one person and they open up a door for you and introduce you to 100 people behind that door. And those people are so generous about sharing their fans with you and sharing their musicians, their bands with you. And that's how it was. It was like just when I met Betty, it opened a world to me that brought me to incredible fans, incredible musicians that sustained me through the rest of my career in Austin. So I loved it. I mean, the food, the Barton Springs. I can't tell you how every day I wake up and go, oh, I miss Barton Springs. Like, I love Austin. As a native Texan, I love Texas. But I knew that where I was with my career, that I wasn't going to be able to afford to live in Austin and to be a full-time artist. So for a while, I thought maybe I would move to Tulsa because I really like the Tulsa music scene. It's easier to get out of Texas. But then I kind of realized, okay, Nashville, there is some industry there, and I had made some connections at the folk conference, folk international conference, with some people in Nashville, and it kind of made me realize, okay, if I lived in Nashville, I could have lunch with the owner of this label. I could have coffee with this PR person. I could be like, I started to kind of see how things worked in that way. And I felt like it was probably a good place for me to be. And as a songwriter, I mean, there are people that are like, my mind is blown just because I'm in Nashville. I recently got to co-write a song with Sam Williams. He's Hank Williams' grandson. He
Wow.
looks so much like, and that song is likely going on his record. That wouldn't have happened if I was in Austin, at least not where I am right now. I realized, okay, I need to be around a bit of the business. And right now that's in Nashville. And I didn't know I was going to fall in love with someone that lived in Nashville and that we would be on tours that are very different. I'm thinking it's going to be me and my little Honda, driving across the country, which of course it still will be. I can't be, opening for Mary ever. I'm sure, I'll be in my little Honda soon. And it's just in the middle of the country. It makes sense to be there.
Yeah, I definitely hear you. So my family and I, my wife and daughter, we were planning to move to Los Angeles for basically the exact same reasons you're talking about. I've been in Austin 10 years now, and it's been great. I got what I wanted out of Austin. Not to say I can't get more because I'm going to be here now longer, which I'll get to in a second. But, um, I was looking for more industry. My wife also wanted to go out and try Los Angeles for a number of different reasons, but kind of just felt like, like most Austin, a lot of Austin musicians feel, it's, like you said, great community, great opportunities. And then if you really want to take that next level, there's definitely reasons on paper to try out a couple other cities. And I think Nashville and Los Angeles are those because New York isn't that anymore. New York's been kind of inhospitable for artists just because of the prices. So it really now we're in a totally different playbook. So we were supposed to move in June, delayed it 6 months, which basically took us to the end of November. And 2 months before November, we had to decide what we were doing for Lisa. And like, look, we can't go to Los Angeles right now because Los Angeles it's not Los Angeles. It is just trying to survive, people moving away. I love California, but it didn't make any sense to move out there right now. So at this point, we're sticking around Austin. And now the question becomes, you keep hearing about people move here. There's this migration. A lot people have always moved to Austin, but now it's crazier than ever. So will Austin somehow maybe develop that side of the industry? There's no way to know, but there's no way to know what the heck is going to happen in the next couple of years. But I know exactly what you
Well,
mean about kind of Nashville, and yeah, so.
Well, here's the thing that I've noticed about being an actor. Well, one, I mean, honestly, I think the fact that BMI has opened an Austin office is incredible. And I was able to get an appointment. I can call Mitch at BMI because, this rock and roll band I sing with Western Youth, it just so happens is a band of a bunch of people were all my writers. I don't know how that happened, but it did. And so I got hooked up with Mitch and he helped me. And I actually moved from ASCAP to BMI because I thought it was great that they are in Austin. And I've got someone I can call and talk to who's invested in songwriters there. So maybe that do something. But what I can say is that
Mhm.
if I could have done something differently, if I could go back maybe in at my time in Austin, maybe what I would have done is at least gone to Nashville. I think you can still, I mean, obviously, any art that is incredible art, especially with the internet, is going to reach people no matter what. I mean, if you're making art that is exceptional, people are going to hear it, right?
Mhm.
But I think if I could go back and really thought of myself as a songwriter, see, it wasn't until I made my first record that I realized that my songs could sound like a bunch of different things. And of course, a good song can be cut by a country artist, a rock artist, an R&B artist, a gospel artist. I never really thought about the concept of other people singing my songs. I'm never going to be an artist that's going to write for the marketplace, but I can see how someone would be interested in writing or co-writing.
Mhm.
Um, that just was not, which is weird because I do consider myself first and foremost a songwriter, but those opportunities didn't occur to me when I lived in Austin. And now that I'm in Nashville, I see people that are living in Austin or Texas coming to Nashville to work. Whether it's making records, meeting with business people. When I'm there,
Mhm.
I've written more with Texas artists since I moved to Nashville, just because I'm in Nashville. It's a mental thing. Oh, you're in Nashville, that's
Mindset,
right.
yeah. Hmm.
It's a weird mindset. Yeah.
Well, that's very cool. So, kind of rounding this whole thing out, sounds like the time has been, the last couple of years have been real productive for you, and that you're going on a good trajectory and been able to kind of find a nice little niche location for yourself. What do you got planned for the future? Obviously, things still very much up in the air with the industry and performing live. However, vaccine seems to be coming down the pike in the next few months. So maybe by summer, things are kind of rolling again. Who knows what they'll look like? What do you have planned for yourself, kind of 3, 6, 12 months going down the line here?
Yeah, so pretty soon I'm going to be releasing a record of acoustic versions of 7 songs of Red Rescue. I went in with Mark Hallman at the Congress House studio. It's called the Congress House Sessions, and re-recorded them. Now that I've been singing these songs solo with just me and acoustic guitar, um, there's kind of just a different vibe to them. And I wanted to have something to sell to, or just for people to listen to that come to the live shows, that when they come see me playing with acoustic guitar, they don't put in a CD and hear like da 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 da, like this crazy bass line and crazy drums. Like they hear something that's more representative of the show. So we did that in February, the Congress House studio. Me and Jane Ellen Bryan harmonies, my friend Chris Nelson, who's been in my band for a long time, sang harmonies. Sammy Powell from Western played some keys. Brian Patterson played guitar. Ray Bonneville plays harmonica on a track. And we did it kind of campfire style, like nothing more than 2, 3 takes. So that's out on my Patreon right now, but that's going to be coming out in the Netherlands very soon and then worldwide. And I'm also about to go into the studio to make my second record.
Very exciting. That's excellent. I know Sammy Powell. He's played on probably 5 or 6 of my tracks. I love him. He's
Oh, great.
fantastic. So you did have the band or other instrumentation with that thing, because when you were saying you want to have kind of the solo acoustic thing, that's exactly kind of what I'm trying to get into over the next couple months, when I can't really still do much, people to people stuff. But you did have other instrumentation, because I was going to follow up and ask, were you doing solo performances, just you and the acoustic as well? And how did you kind of do it live? Did you acoustic first, then vocals over? Did you have a kind of method that really worked?
Yeah, I mean,
So
with
I'd be
this
interested to
record,
know, because I
well,
might be doing it. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the first record we tracked live with a band and then did a lot of building around it. I mean, woodshedder, like he would experiment
Mhm.
with stuff. But with Mark, I went in, me, Chris, Jane, no metronome or anything, and we just sang together. And I was really excited about that, because I feel like there's some songs where the harmony parts were just like born with the song, and it was weird to not have them on Red Rescue. But I will say, Craig taught me something, the producer of Red Rescue, that I thought was cool. He said, well, think about all of those records that you love that didn't have harmony in those spots, and you got to sing harmony in your car along with the song. You get to participate in the record. And I was like, well,
Mhm.
that's a way to think about it. But as
Yeah.
far as this, what I'm going to do with this next batch of songs, pretty, they're pretty heavy, they're pretty intense. And I think what might happen is that it might just be me with an acoustic guitar singing, and then we build around it. I've interviewed several folks about it, and that's kind of what they've all said. I think that's going to be the vibe of this next record, which I'm like, dang, I would still like to have the opportunity to like really see a record be built from the ground up in a different way. But I also want to honor the songs. And I think what needs to be at the center of this next record is me and an acoustic guitar getting these really vulnerable performances out of these really vulnerable, difficult songs. And
Yeah,
honestly,
that's
it's kind of like a great record to make, a style of record to make in COVID. It's
yeah,
safe.
totally. And that's beautiful. And that's really what I want to kind of do as well. It's like I've got 5 or 6 just purely acoustic songs, but I'm like, do I track the guitar first? Do I, because I've done stuff like that before, but in this moment, I'm trying to decide, do I want to do track the guitar and then do vocal performance over it? Ideally, and I think you probably are hinting at this too, and saying, ideally you just want to get that perfect you live with a guitar singing at the same time you're playing, and get that perfect natural take. So I'm going to try to do that. It sounds like you're going to try to do it and build around it as well, and hopefully we can pull it off. But there's something special about that. Like, you don't hear that kind of record that much. I mean, I guess the most famous, well, there's a lot of folk stuff that's like that, right? But obviously the early Dylan stuff. But like some of my favorite
Yeah.
stuff is when you hear like somebody who's a famous band fronter, like let's say Bob Marley. Some of my favorite recordings are like some of the reggae greats when they're just playing with an acoustic guitar, because it's like a folk song. It's a
Mm-hmm.
Jamaican folk song, but it's got the soul. It's so intimate, and it's beautiful. I mean, it is beautiful. So trying to kind of get to that level of effect, but it's tricky, man. You gotta really tap into something majestic to kind of get that feel across that you want other people to feel. I'm sure you are in that same kind of zone.
Yeah, I guess I don't think a lot about what I want other people to feel, because
Mm,
I feel like my process with writing is like there's usually, if the song is good enough that it's going to stick around and be a part of a recorded piece of work or in the set musically or is going to be shared, something happens to me during the process, whether I'm crying or I go, or it's like I just finished this song that's it's weird, but I think it's going to be the title track of the next record, and it's like 7.5 minutes long. And I think I wrote like 16 verses for it originally, and had to really do a lot of like puzzle piece work to figure out really what came together. And it's still a 7.5 minute song. I could not get through the last verse without crying. And I don't have that experience very often with what I write. And it's written from the
right.
perspective of a 16-year-old kid that works at Walmart that knocked up his girlfriend. Like,
Mm,
but yet I'm that kid. And that, I mean, I don't know, it blows my mind. I feel like there's something like songwriting is so spiritual to me. There's something about that channel, you know, it's like if I feel like my partner teaches songwriting, and she'll say like Jesus could come down from heaven and say, I think you got it wrong with that verse, and you have to know in your heart like, I love you, Lord, but I'm not going to touch it, like it has to be this way. And so I think of it more as like, if the song is right, the song is going to do what the song is going to do. And really don't feel like I have a whole lot of control over it once it's in its final form, other than just to honor it, emphasize the words that need to be emphasized and sing it with integrity. And then it'll do what it's supposed to do. That's like my religion.
I agree. I check pretty much all those boxes too. My writing process is very much, you know, that you're the channel. Something comes through.
Mhm.
You are the conduit, the channel that guides the energy in whatever way sounds right to you and feels right to you. And when it sounds right, it's done. And when it feels right, it's done. And what you're the one to decide. It may take 3 years to finish a goddamn song, but you know,
Yeah.
you're going to do it your way. I think for me, it comes down to when I say what other people feel or you want them to feel it, it just comes down to the simple kind of, to me, the ultimate goal is people feeling music in the way that you feel music by other
Right.
people that has touched you. You know what I mean? It's like that feeling that's inspired you as a 12-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old. That's the goal, is to have put implants into somebody else that feeling that you've had towards music. So, and I think the way to do that is honor the code that you just laid out. I mean, that's more or less my code as well. Is kind of let the let the magic do its work, guide it, make it as clean and as whatever as you can, and then here you go. That's it. you know. So
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat for sure. Well, Jaimee, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you're doing good out in Key West, and hopefully you have a lot of success coming back to Nashville. New records coming out, always exciting. So thank you very much, and I wish you the best.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
Ditto. Travel safe back to Nashville and stay healthy.
Thanks. You too.
Okay.